Good evening. Thanks for joining us at 7. I'm Stephanie Simmons. We start tonight with breaking news on the murder trial of Larry Millete. More than 5 years after Maya Millete was last seen, a jury has found her husband, Larry, guilty of murdering her. The verdict came down about 2:30 this afternoon following nearly 8 weeks of trial. Tonight, our reporters are sharing the latest details, and legal experts will also help us break down the case. But first, we start our coverage tonight with Jenny Day, who was at the courthouse as the verdict came down. Jenny.
You know, Stephanie, it has been nearly 8 weeks of testimony. Prosecutors calling 67 witnesses. The defense only took 1 day, calling 3 witnesses, but a lot of just emotional testimony, courtroom battles. The jurors were just taking notes very intently. And again, you know, this is just a case that has gripped our community. Maya disappeared 5 years and 6 months ago, a beautiful mother of 3 from here in Chula Vista. Many of you may have helped in a search or attended a vigil, but again, this case has now come to a close. First-degree premeditated murder. Larry Millete is guilty of killing Maya. Again, the state, the county has not even officially declared her dead, but a jury of 12 strangers all agreed unanimously, less than 6 hours of deliberation, that Larry was guilty and that he did plan Maya's death. You know, we want to keep the focus on Maya. Again, the prosecutors continuously pointed to the fact that she would have never left her children. Defense said maybe she jumped over the backyard fence, walked down a drainage ditch, could have avoided video surveillance. And jurors, all 12 of them, saying no way. One of the jurors we spoke with, who you'll hear from shortly, she said her heart was just beating out of her chest. They all understood just the weight of this, the seriousness of this. They say they are exhausted, but they put this puzzle piece together. Again, this is a rare no-body case, but the circumstantial evidence was just mounting. This is a group of 7 women and 5 men. They said that when they first got into the jury room just yesterday, following closing arguments, they said that they each went around the room, each person given 3 minutes timed to kind of talk about the evidence that they felt was strongest. And then they voted, on paper, so privately, and they all agreed that it was first-degree murder. So that is why we have reached this verdict so quickly as well. Again, they agree that Maya had plans for her future, loved her Jeeping community. And yes, she was having an affair. That's been a big focal point of this case, but that only pointed that she wanted out of her marriage. She had contacted a divorce attorney the very day that she disappeared. And again, they say that when Larry then repositioned the car at 6 o'clock the next morning, the day after she disappeared, they believe that it is him loading her body into that black Lexus SUV and then dumps her body in the desert. Hear from that juror now.
Where there was no body, we never saw anything come out of the house. We were convinced she didn't go out of the back fence, the black wrought iron fence. Sure. And there was no evidence that she came out the front door, went to the side, to the right or left. There was cameras. Zero evidence of her ever leaving, except for on January the 8th at 6:30-ish in the morning, when he backs that out, starts at 6:01. It's all there in the record. And then he pulls away and he's gone for approximately 12 hours. We think he took her in that vehicle, the Lexus, and he knows where he's left her.
Yeah, 444 miles were unaccounted for in the vehicle. They also say that his phone had been turned off when he still had about 80% battery. They pointed to these unique spell casts. The defense saying he was just trying to save his marriage, but they said that it was just controlling and that he was just a master manipulator. Again, he is now facing 25 years to life in prison. The San Diego County District Attorney's Office saying that they will the justice has been served, but that they will never stop searching for Maya. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, we've heard about that a lot today. Jenny, thank you. News 8 has been following this case since it started, and 2 of our reporters will share some insight on how we got here. We're joined now by Kelly Hessedal, who's had a very long day, and also former News 8 investigative reporter David Gottfredson, who was one of our first reporters on this case just days after Maya was last seen. We know you both have a lot to say about this and to compare notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I first think the first stunning part was the fact it only took the jury like 6 hours to come back with this verdict. And I was just telling someone when we got that email that had just 4 words on it, a verdict has been reached. I mean, I threw the computer. I mean, it was pandemonium in the parking lot because I think we just thought it was going to take longer because the trial had lasted so long. There was so much circumstantial evidence to put out there. We thought maybe the jury would take a couple of days to go through it. I was told even the prosecutor said it probably wouldn't come back till Monday or Tuesday. So yeah, when it came in, I was stunned. What did you think?
That was the surprising part. I did think it was going to be first-degree murder guilty because of the circumstantial evidence that they put forward. Mainly that 12-hour window where he turned off his cell phone and nobody knew where he was, and he said he was at the beach.
Yeah, and I really think that when the verdict came down, no one was really sure whether it was going to go guilty or whether it was going to go not guilty. I mean, you sat there next to me for closing arguments. I mean, the defense had a pretty strong closing.
They did. They pointed out that it's not their job to prove that he's innocent. It's the prosecutor's job to prove he's guilty. And they don't have a body, they don't have a murder weapon, and they don't have a cause of death. And they also did a lot of argument about Larry trying to justify his spell castings and his behavior, and tried to make him a human being in that closing argument. Yep. Because he was worried about his marriage falling apart, and that does appear to be the motive for
right,
the
she
murder.
kept saying contextualize all this. If you look at it through the lens of, hey, this guy is innocent, he was just desperate, you know, maybe he was a weirdo, maybe he handled things in a weird way, but, you know, don't judge him because he contacted spellcasters. That's just kind of the way he handled it at that point, but that doesn't make him guilty, but obviously the jury felt otherwise.
Well, the really weird part of that closing argument, I thought, was when she said that Larry was being abused by Maya Millete because she was lying about her affair, and they called him a puppy dog. And he is really mild-mannered, and that's why I think he would have been
yes.
He would have been good on the witness stand, because nothing's going to rile him up, and he's not going to explode on the witness stand. He's very polite, and I've spoken to him in jail. He's called me on my cell phone, and he's a very polite guy and very deceiving, apparently.
I mean, I've never spoken to him personally. I've heard him talk before, but I mean, my impression would be the reason why the defense didn't put him up there is because he wasn't likable to the jury. I think they worried that he wasn't going to come across as believable. I mean, what are you going to say about where you were for 12 hours? When you,
right.
when you don't have any proof? And how are you going to explain, oh, I just didn't have my phone that day. Oh, I didn't have my phone when I went to the Grand Canyon with the 3 kids. I mean, how would you explain that? How would he explain that?
Yeah, and the cross-examination would have been brutal on him. I think he would have held up, but I think some of the legal experts said maybe they didn't put him on the stand to leave an option for appeal at a future date. One of the things that they said might be appealable is the judge's ruling early on that they can't point to her lover as the guy who did it, the guy she was having an affair with, Jamie Laird. Before the trial even began, the judge said, you can't go down that road. You can't point to him as the murderer. It's called third-party culpability. And there just was no evidence that he was even there. He was in the hospital, and his wife was giving birth on the night and the day that Maya went missing.
Well, and I will say there was a sidebar. Something that the jury did not get to see were actual photos of Jamie at the hospital. The judge ruled that, you know, went down this whole road that opened up a whole nother can of worms about how much they could talk about Jamie, how much they could bring him in, how much they could question all the investigation around him. And the judge ruled, well, you know, let's just leave it out there now. You can talk about the fact that he was there that night, but we're not going to show these hospital photos. But going back to the third-party culpability, I mean, I think it was because there just wasn't enough evidence to prove he did anything. And one of the things, and I know this isn't a legal you know, doesn't have legal standing, but if you saw the two of them, especially Jamie and both of them testify, Jamie and her were polar opposites. You know, I would say the two of them, their relationship, Jamie let her. She wore the pants in that relationship. I mean, she was all business. She was, you know, very direct, a sheriff's deputy. Both of them were so credible and believable. Like, I truly don't believe that Jamie had anything to do with Maya's disappearance. And I don't think the jury thought that at all. So even if that had been the defense, even if they'd been able to point the finger at them, I do not believe it would have been successful.
Well, you mentioned those photos, and I want to point out that there's a lot of evidence in this case that has not seen public scrutiny and is still sealed. More than 30 pretrial motions remain sealed in this case, and Judge Enrique Camarena, he also conducted what he called off-the-record hearings in this case, and they're really secret hearings that take place in his chambers before and during the trial. And in fact, just on Monday, he excluded the public from the courtroom. And so there's a lot of evidence. I know there's national media outlets following up on this, 48 Hours, Dateline, and they might want to look at those motions, those 30 motions that are sealed. He also banned cameras.
I was just going to say, I know we're all, you know, a little bit still upset about that. But I mean, the reasoning behind the cameras, he was saying that it had to do with jurors and like their privacy and that kind of thing. My gut says it had to do with the fact there was 3 kids involved in this, that there was some testimony about their mother, about the affair, you know, things like that, that I would imagine he felt it wasn't worth putting all that out there, because once it's out there, it just never goes away. And we know the older daughter's on social media. I've been hearing she has been looking at some of the stuff about this trial.
Well, let me point out that more than 200,000 people in San Diego County on any given night watch local news. And those people were blindfolded and they were unable to see or hear witnesses, attorney opening statements, attorney closing statements, and that leads to distrust of the judicial system in the United States. I mean, imagine if it was a hung jury. Everyone would be saying, what happened, what happened? And they had no idea because they'd never heard one single witness on the stand.
This is true. I will tell you, a lot of people that have come up to me that have not been in the courtroom thought for sure this was not going to go the direction that it did today. And I was shocked. Like, they would tell me this. They would say, whoa, there's no body. It doesn't sound like their case is strong enough. And I'm like, if you had been sitting in the courtroom and sat through this trial, I think you would feel differently. But you're right. I mean, having cameras being banned, that really excluded people from seeing the testimony and experiencing it for themselves.
What else shall we talk about? Anyway, I will go back to the prosecution's case. That there was just so much circumstantial evidence, and the fact that he turned off his phone for 12 hours, and that video of him backing out of the garage. If you're taking your kid to the beach, you don't need to reposition your car and then leave. You can just load the kid in and you're going to the beach. But he repositioned his car and backed up, and that was on the surveillance tape. And then, of course, the surveillance tape of Maya Millete arriving at the home and then never leaving. And the only way, and her Jeep is parked right in front, and she, you know, she's gone. She never drove her Jeep again. She never used her credit cards. She abandoned her children. It was just not reasonable to the jurors.
Right, and hopefully her family is sleeping a little bit easier tonight. Hopefully they can get a good night's sleep for the first time maybe in 5 years.
Right, yeah, they did say at the press conference that justice has been served, but they're looking for her body, obviously, and now it seems like there's no motivation for Larry to, show prosecutors where the body is, because his sentence is pretty much set in stone. They believe maybe it's near Blythe, California, right? Some of the testimony there. And I had never heard about this trip that Larry took to the Grand Canyon with the 3 kids, almost a month after she disappeared.
With no phone.
He didn't use his phone, but one of the kids had her phone, and they were able to track that trip. I had never heard about that, just like I had never heard about the hemlock that they found in his house.
Right. All right, so Stephanie, we'll send it back to you. We're getting the wrap queue, I guess.
Yeah, great insight from both of you. And by the way, thank you to David coming out of retirement just to be back in studio and give us all the details and his thoughts. Thank you both. All right, up next, our coverage continues of the Larry Millete murder trial and today's verdict. After the break, we'll talk with two legal experts and their thoughts on this case. Stay with us.
While today's verdict is significant, May is still missing. We continue to hope that one day she will be found so her family can lay her to rest with the dignity she deserves.
After more than 5 years since Maya Millete, the missing mother of 3, was last seen, a jury has found her husband, Larry, guilty of murdering her in the first degree. We got word of a verdict a little before 2:30 this afternoon, following nearly 8 weeks of trial and less than a full day of jury deliberations. Joining me now to break down the case are criminal defense attorneys Gretchen Von Helms and Brian Watkins. Verdict itself, let's talk about that, the lightning speed. So the jury deliberated for less than 6.5 hours. What were your thoughts on that? We'll go with you first.
You know, once I saw that it was such a short period of time, I knew that he was going to be found guilty. The reason for that is because there wasn't a lot of contradicting evidence. I mean, the prosecution put on 3 weeks of evidence. The defense put on 3 hours of evidence. So when you don't have a lot of testimony to contradict and make opposing and fight against each other, then they've only been fed prosecution theory. I said it's likely that they're going to go with the prosecution theory, which they did.
And Gretchen, we spoke earlier at 5:30 and you said, I was a little shocked. Why?
I was shocked because I really thought that a good jury should have considered more things. They should have each given their opinion before they voted. And so they should have talked about it and then gone through the weekend and then talked about it again next week. So I thought it would come back sometime mid next week. And I was surprised, and they came back and voted him guilty.
In other words, you thought, oh, maybe they'll sleep on it. But
Yes.
this was unanimous. Okay, so we're talking about a monumental case based on mostly circumstantial evidence. So what here of all of the facts was really the key piece that you think really made this the guilty verdict for first-degree murder?
You know, it wasn't a key piece of evidence. You know, when you have a case that's completely circumstantial, all it is little pieces of the puzzle. So each puzzle piece doesn't look like anything. It is nothing. Only when they all come together do you see the picture. And that's what the prosecution did, put a bunch of little pieces of, you know, circumstantial evidence together and painted a big picture. And that's why the jury found him guilty.
And where, Gretchen, do you think the defense fell short? Because it's their job to cast doubt. So did you think that they didn't do a good job?
It's not their job to cast
okay.
doubt.
Okay, tell us more about that.
It is, the law is that if there is a reasonable doubt, then you must acquit the defendant that's on trial. They don't have to testify. You can't read anything to that. And if you have a doubt, oh, maybe she took off with lover number 3. Maybe she's in the Philippines. Then you must acquit him. And so the defense did a good job in arguing the law, which is to be applied. But I think the jury, like Brian said, they had so many little pieces, and the prosecution did a really good job of that, of piecing all the pieces together. And the fact that he didn't keep searching for it, didn't have the spellcasters after January 8th was huge against him.
His behavior significantly changed after
Yes.
that. Now let's talk about Larry. Do you think the outcome would have been different in this case if Larry himself took this stand?
No, and the reason why is because there was a lot of things that Larry needed to explain. I don't know whether or not he had a good explanation for those things. There's a lot of things that are just weird, and you put them all together and you say the jury could come to the conclusion, this guy is the crazy guy that somebody who would kill his wife and bury her in the desert. And he did not get on the stand and say, you know, oh my God, now that I've heard him speak, oh, that makes sense, that's logical. All those questions remain unanswered, and that's why the jury convicted him, because there was a lot of unanswered questions that may have been able to be explained, but the fact that he didn't explain them, the jury's conclusion is they're not explainable.
So you think he may have put his foot in his mouth if he would have taken the stand?
Well, yes, because that goes to his defense attorneys and him deciding, based on what the judge's ruling were early on in the case, hey, do we want to put him on and have the prosecution attack him and have him have no good answers, or do we just want to keep it lean so we have a good issue on appeal?
Something that was really compelling in this case in its entirety is the digital trail. So what key piece stuck out to you with that?
You know, the digital trail, like I said, nothing is super key. There's not a smoking gun here at all. It's all just a little piece of the puzzle, putting it together how crazy, unhinged this guy's actions were. And like I said, you don't have an explanation for those actions. They remain viewed by the jury as being unhinged. And when you're unhinged, clearly you're most likely the person responsible for her disappearance. Of all the people in the world, someone did it, probably Larry. And that's what the jury came to the conclusion of.
All right, and Gretchen, we're running out of time.
And
Final
juror
thoughts
number
from
3
you.
basically said he's a master manipulator. So commenting on Brian Watkins, that juror number 3 essentially went with that he had all these little pieces of the puzzle and he had manipulated the facts.
And here we find the verdict, first-degree murder, guilty with Larry Millete. All right, Gretchen, Brian, thank you so much. And we are out of time. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of News 8 at 7.